Hello, today I'm painting this countryside scene using a Wacom tablet in Photoshop. You don't really have to use Photoshop to follow along. It will work in any app you can use on your iPad or Windows, Mac, it doesn't really matter. Most of the time I paint on an iPad with Procreate, but the tools are not really that important, so I'll explain how I'm going along, but don't worry if you don't have Photoshop, it'll still work with others. So my first job for this painting is to, and all paintings, landscape really, is to block out the big shapes and get the kind of the composition right. And so this is fairly fundamental. You get the shapes quite close to what you want because it's quite difficult to go back, and I rarely go back, so I'm quite careful to get the shapes here that I want. Not perfect, because I'm not actually overly worried what the shapes are like. I just want something to go on, and when I say get the shapes right, that means they can't be too symmetrical or the same size or the same shape and all that kind of stuff. So you want a variety of shapes. So you can see there's a few different ones on different colors, etc. And so basically I want to get a rough idea of what the painting's going to look like with no detail whatsoever. And the detail won't make much difference to how good or bad the painting is. This stage is going to determine really if your painting is actually going to work. And I mean, obviously you can't really tell that it's going to work until the end, but we can have a good estimation of what the painting is going to look like. So for all my paintings, I try to make it so that the sun is highlighting an area very obviously. So there's a big difference between highlights and shadows. So for this one, there's this streak going across the middle, which is lit up the grass and the road. So it'll be more obvious as I do the highlights later. But when you have highlights and shadows like that, it makes it a lot easier to paint. If you're using real photos, that rarely happens. It does happen, but most of the time we just get kind of everything looking the same color. And you know, when it's overcast or even if it's really sunny, we don't get this cool lighting quite rarely. So look out for that, and you can only do as well as your reference. I'll stick the reference on screen now. I don't really copy it, and I leave lots of details out. But you'll notice I use it, and it looks similar, but not exactly. I do paint without references sometimes, and that can be fun, but when trying to do realistic skies, well, I mean, not realistic, but semi-realistic skies, it's very difficult without something to go on. And so you'll see that I don't copy it exactly. So now I'm creating a new layer above these blocky shapes, and you'll see that now I paint, it can't go out to the layer. So whatever app you're using, it'll have clipper mask because it's fairly fundamental. So if you're not using Procreate, just look for clipper mask on some other app, and I'm pretty sure it's called clipper mask everywhere, so it shouldn't be hard to find. So I don't use many brushes, so I just use the built-in brushes pretty much on any app I use. I don't try and install or buy any brushes or anything. It doesn't really matter about the brush if you don't use it correctly. It's not going to make any difference to your painting really. So try the default brushes and don't really worry about which one you're using. If it's doing what you want it to do, then use it and stick with it. Don't do anything special. The only thing you might notice is up the top of the settings of the brush, the flow is only 5%. That means when I'm pressing down on my pen, it's not there's not a lot of color coming out. So it means I can go over it and over it and over it as many times as I like to make it more opaque, and it means I can do detail really quickly. Otherwise I'll have to change colors all the time, and I don't really want to do that. I want to stay painting as much as possible. So so that flow in Photoshop is really useful. It's, again, that's in other apps. It'll be called something different probably, but have a look for it, and it helps a lot to be able to paint lots of things without having to change the brush constantly or the color constantly. So check that out. It helps. And obviously you got the pressure of the pen. So most of the time I'm pressing quite lightly on the pen. It kind of depends how sensitive your pen is, but usually I find these pens are very sensitive, so light is kind of better. So as I said earlier, this painting is has a big highlight down the middle, and that's kind of what I look for in my references, so I can have a nice big contrast. Now what that does, it makes you look at the bright area, and it makes it stand out. Now one thing that's quite tricky with landscapes is trying to find an area of focus, and so your painting always has to have a focus, and that can be anything really. I used to struggle with this for many years when books and tutorials would say you need a focus. I didn't really understand what they were talking about for a long time, and especially with landscapes, because obviously if you have a person, then the person is going to be the focus, or if you've got a big tree or a car or a lake or whatever, it's kind of obvious what the focus is. Now generally I paint landscapes like this when there's no obvious focus. So what it really means is you need a focus area, and that can just be anywhere on the painting. It could be the sky, it could be the big mountain in the background. It can be literally anything, but what it means is it's just an area that you want somebody to look at. Now there's a few tricks to do that, but one of the simplest ways is to have high contrast, because we all look at contrast first. It makes our eyes look at contrast, and so contrast obviously means the biggest difference between light and dark. So the yellow highlight there is almost white, and then we got the darkish road, and then we got the dark like bushes in front of it. So the road is really dark actually, even though it's got light white bits, it's still really dark, so we get nice contrast. So you got to be careful though when you do this area of focus that it is the only one. You don't really want two. Now you can do that, and it is possible, but it's difficult. So I would say just stick to one area of focus. So obviously mine's kind of like the strip down the middle, and where the light hits the grass fields and the road. And I make sure that I don't make anything too contrasty anywhere else. Otherwise it won't do the job, and you'll be looking at two things, and then the composition doesn't work if you have two. Generally you have two things to look at. So anyway, I'm working on the sky now, and I'm putting in the clouds. Now they turned out okay, I think. I'm still trying to learn how to paint clouds. I find them one of the most difficult things to paint. I find lots of things difficult to paint, to be honest, but one of them is certainly clouds. So I've started to do them more and more to hopefully upskill on the clouds. Now again, I don't really copy the reference much. I just kind of get a gist of where they go. Obviously these clouds are so complicated you couldn't really copy the reference anyway. I'm just trying to understand what's happening, and generally what I'm seeing with clouds like these anyway, there seems to be three main colors. It's like bright yellowish from the sun, and then as you get further away from the sun it goes orange, and then it goes purple ish, and it doesn't always quite work like that though, because you can see top left, we're quite close to the sun there, and it's still in shadow. So I don't quite understand that, and I need the references to be able to help me do that. But if you stick to the three colors, yellowish, orangey, and then purple, it seems to work quite well if you're struggling with them. Hopefully I'll get better and try and understand what's going on here. The purple is obviously the shadow part, so depending on where these clouds are, the sun is not hitting the side if it's purple. But that's obviously, in our heads, that's 3D is quite hard to, it's quite hard to make that up, so you got to really copy the reference there. So one fun thing is to do the foreground. If you like detail, and you've got a foreground, you can kind of go nuts here and do as much as you want. I don't do much detail in the background, and it's all kind of blurry and fuzzy, and that's on purpose. But you can go, to be honest, my foregrounds are not crazy detailed either, but you can if you want. I'd like to paint fairly messy, and I like to get the painting done in like 30 minutes. This took me a little bit longer. This took me just under an hour, I think, pausing here and there. It's still a little bit messy, so you'd want to go and tidy those up. But one thing to note is I didn't want to zoom in at all to this painting, and I didn't zoom in once, so this all painted in this zoomed out state. Not sure what the zoom is. The canvas is about 4K size. It's like 3800 by something, I forget. It's roughly 4K size, and this monitor is actually 4K too, so I can fit quite a lot in there. So if you got a smaller resolution, this may not work for you, being all zoomed out all the time. You might have to zoom in a little bit, maybe halfway or something. And if you only have a 1080p monitor tablet type thing, then it might be a bit tricky. But then you can just make your canvas a little bit smaller. So with landscapes, it's quite important not to zoom in too much. This is just a camera zoom in here. It's not me actually zooming in. And it's important not to zoom in too much, or you add a ridiculous amount of detail that nobody can actually see, and it's a little bit pointless, and it can take a really, really long time. So unless you're going to print these out big or something, then these tiny details don't really matter. I mean, if they matter to you, then like zoom in and do them, but I would rather, just paint another painting, to be honest, and not spend hours and hours on one painting. I can't do that anyway, because I get distracted, and I only have about an hour attention on a painting before I get kind of bored with it, and I want to paint something else. So, but if you're the type of person who likes to paint for hours and hours, then once you get to around this stage, you can keep on going, and then if you do zoom in a little bit, obviously you can start to fix some of the messier parts, but I would say that's completely optional. So I got most of the detail in at this point, so I'm really just kind of critiquing the painting and seeing if I need to do anything to it. Now, you could spend a long time on this, and basically I'm just looking for things I don't like. So to say I make it better or whatever, it's not so much better, it's like, do I like that, and does that look funny, or could I make that look a bit better? So it's not really about better, I shouldn't say that. It's more about, is there anything technically incorrect? Is there things floating about, or weird stuff? And I generally focus around the most important part, where is the focus of the painting. The clouds are quite important because they're obviously quite detailed too, and a little bit contrasty, so you have to be a bit careful. So if you like that, give me a sub and a thumbs up, and I'll catch you in the next one.